Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of online instructor certification. Now, hold on a minute. I am just going to switch over here. And there we go. These are the topics that we will be covering this week. So, let's get it back. There we go. So, the 3 topics or the 3 concepts we really want you to get this week and think about when it comes to online learning are metacognition, social constructivism, and connectivism. Now, I know your head might feel like it's exploding by now, especially after all the discussions that you did last week. And I went in and read them, and there was a lot of metacognition, social constructivism, and connectivism going on there. So you pretty much know these concepts already, but for this week, we'd like you to make them explicit. So the first one, metacognition, term you might have heard of before, and it's awareness of one's knowledge, what you know and what you don't know, and really, how do you learn? And how do you go about studying? What do you need to do? Are you a highlighter and a person who needs to circle things? Can you read things on screen? Do you need to print things off? So metacognition is really thinking about how one understands and how one learns. Now, some examples of metacognition and the phases are you might develop a plan before approaching a task, like you might make a decision on how you're going to go ahead and study a certain module. And when you're doing metacognition, you're monitoring your understanding. This might be by giving yourself like little quick quizzes, for the intro video that you did last week. This might be that you might have done a test video before you did the final video that you posted. And the other thing about metacognition, the last one, is evaluating your thinking to see if you're understanding things. Now, when it comes to you as a learner in this course, we are teaching you about online learning and about the domain of online learning. The domain of online learning is different than face-to-face. There are different strategies and there are different things you have to use. And when I was reading the discussions, there were a lot of people posting that they did not have a great time when they were taking an online course. Now, I'm going to say that it might not have been your fault. The instructor or professor you had might not have been able to translate what they did fabulously face-to-face and take it to online. They might not have been able to transfer things well over to that domain. And I've met many face-to-face professors and instructors who really don't think about what they're going to put up online and how they're going to engage students. Now, to go on to some metacognition skill examples. Now, just remember, you're thinking in 2 separate ways. You're thinking about yourself as a learner, and then since you are also an instructor, you are thinking about how you're going to teach students and how you are going to encourage them to have metacognition skills. Now, some of the examples here, knowing the limits of your memory. For example, in any kind of meeting you've been or any kind of class, you've known some people who had to write down every single thing and then might have raised their hands and asked someone to repeat it. While there were other people who just sat there and just kind of absorbed it all. So one of the examples of a metacognition skill is knowing the limits of your memory. Are you going to remember things, from listening to this video, or are you going to want to write down some notes? Or would a screenshot of this video suffice for these skill examples? Now, self-monitoring your learning, that's doing things like making an outline or doing a concept map of the different things. Now, The next example of metacognition skill is perhaps you're the kind of person who, when you open up a textbook, you skim the subheadings first before you go back and do the reading because you like to have that outline or you like to know what the parameters are. That's something that I do. The next one, rehearse a skill to gain proficiency. This might be something even like talking live over Google Hangout or something like that. The next one is doing self-testing. So think about how you've been learning face-to-face, and then think about for metacognition online, how you're going to have to adjust things. Are you the kind of person who, if you read from a screen or if you read off a Kindle, everything is perfectly fine? Or are you someone who has to print things off? That's one of the biggest examples that we have. Okay, so I went into last week's discussion and I found some great examples of metacognition. Now, you're going to have to do this for discussions this week. All I ask is that you make it explicit. But I was able to, first of all, Bernadette was great when she was talking about how she took online classes. She was talking about how she likes learning with peers. That's a great thing to, that's an absolutely great thing to know. And it's also something that you can think about as an online instructor. As an online instructor, how do your students learn and how do they prefer to learn? Because here we have Beth, and she goes that she loves the connections. But, she also likes being more independent and not handheld. And over here, Alan is one who is saying that, yes, I love doing things independently. Well, you as an instructor are going to be making choices about what portions of the course should be independent and what portions are group. Now, like we see here, Bernadette likes a group, likes communicating with people, likes have the feeling that she's taking a class with everyone else. Now, Alan saying Alan's here saying that he is more independent. And again, Alan knows how he likes to learn and what works for him. For your online courses, you're going to be thinking about how you can give your students different activities that will allow them to work independently. And then you're going to make decisions about when is it best for them to come together, say, do discussions or do projects. So for your discussions this week, we are asking that you go ahead and make it explicit. Discuss your metacognition and also discuss how you're going to help your students with their metacognition online. So when it comes to learning and metacognition, we're looking for that deeper learning. We're looking for students to understand how they learn and to utilize those skills in an online course. And for your students, some of them, it might be their first time learning online. The next concept is social constructivism. Now, social constructivism, heavy focus on context, culture, and collaboration. This you saw last week in discussions, and I hope we see it again this week in discussion. There's a social interaction, peer-to-peer. There's an MKO, a more knowledgeable other. And we try to give people authentic tasks. So it's not busy work. And I think there was a great example in discussions last week, and I think I'm going to blame this one on Alan, but he gave the example, and I'll bring it up a little later, about how students should use technology. Is this relevant for what students would be doing? And Alan was giving the example of math. Let me throw out the example of accounting. We've had accounting instructors who have had their students make screencast videos. And a screencast is kind of like this. What I'm doing here, while I was personable and I showed myself at the beginning, a screencast is when there is, I am live streaming my screen, but a student could record it, and then I'm talking behind it. So As far as accounting, we've had online instructors who have had their students make a screencast, and the students come back and say immediately that they were able to go to their workplace and make a screencast, and their employer was so impressed, and their employer was then having them make more screencasts. So think about your students and whether or not they'll be able to use this kind of tool, and whether it's an authentic task. So I would say for accounting, making a screencast, totally authentic. You will decide in your context whether or not using other videos are authentic. So I pulled up some things from last week. So here we have Rebecca, and Rebecca's saying, I'm such a relational person. My big concern is teaching online is not getting to know the students as well in the online forum as I do in the class setting. Okay, and so Angela here gives her a great suggestion. Her suggestion is use a video conferencing tool. And the part about this, I think it's an excellent example. And let me toss something in as a more knowledgeable other, not on the content of early childhood education, but on the students in early childhood education. Rebecca, I would have to answer you that the early childhood education students are the chattiest bunch in any online discussion forum. I think if you add things like ask them to add an image or possibly ask them to add a video, you will get to know your students very well. They are a group that really like to discuss things online. And let me go to this next slide. I wanted to give you another example of social constructivism straight from week 1. And this is from Alan. And I was kind of referring to this a little bit earlier. Look, here is your MKO, your more knowledgeable other, or your peer coming in and going, okay, since we're talking about what technologies we should let our students use and what should we have them do, he came up with 3 questions. I think these 3 questions are great. Now, like Alan said, if you go back and read his discussion, you're going to have to adjust this, but this might be a really nice rule of thumb for you. So this is a great example of peer-to-peer learning. This is a great example of social constructivism. In the discussions this week, we're just asking you, as you're answering the questions, also point out if something is social constructivism, if it's metacognition, or if it's connectivism. Because a lot of the learning that happens online is about the community. Now, I know there was a comment in discussion about not one more threaded discussion, and I completely agree. So be thoughtful about your discussions and whether you believe your students can actually contribute to the discussion. And if you can make your discussion truly meet, the standards of social constructivism. If it's just putting it up there because you feel like you have to have a discussion, instead, call one of the instructional designers. Feel free to call me. We can brainstorm out some other activity that week. If discussions just feel like you're putting it in for the sake of having something there. We do want active online courses, but not everything has to be discussion. And we can work with you on that. Now, I will tell you that the week that you're currently in is heavy on discussions, but there are other activities that can be done, and we can help you with that. Okay, the last concept I wanted to go over is connectivism. Now, connectivism really relates to having your students go beyond the beyond D2L and looking for information and knowledge past what's available with you and in your class. So, some of the principles of connectivism, and again, you may already do these. You just may not be calling it connectivism. Some of these things, learners move into a variety of possibly different unrelated fields. Informal learning is part of our learning. And learning is a continual process. Now, based on after reading your discussions for week 1, I know everyone already knows this. Everyone gave lots of examples of how they were continually learning, whether it was learning technologies, whether it was learning more about the content area, or even learning along with your students. And here is the example that I really loved. Now, you were asked about YouTube, but at least for this class, it seems that there were a number of people who have had washing machine problems and have gone onto YouTube to find this. So I just pulled up this example. It totally fits the informal learning. It fits that you are continually learning new things, and it fits that you're going to have to learn from a variety of fields. Now, the next thing about connectivism, and while I have highlighted that learning and knowledge rests in a diversity of opinions, there's some other ones there, like learning may reside in non-human appliances, maybe like YouTube channels. And the capacity to know is more critical than what is known. And learning is a process of connecting specialized nodes or information sources. Now, these specialized nodes or information sources could be things like a YouTube channel. It could be things like knowing where to go into the library database and to find the journals. It could be an open source journal that is on the internet. It could be a blog post. It could be the Center for Disease Control's Twitter stream. So when it comes to connectivism, just want you thinking about all the learning that can happen outside of the LMS. And so you could start thinking about how your students can be making connections there. For social constructivism, we're pretty much focusing, at least this week, we're pretty much focusing on the discussion board as being the place where social constructivism happens. But connectivism, we're focusing on how do you get information from the outside into your students, and how do you send your students out to get that information? I mean, think about it. This information can come from anywhere. This could come from, the Westminster librarian, or this information could be a layer of augmented reality that your students are looking through their phones to see. And what we want to do is, there's an affordance with online learning. You can send your students as part of their regular activities, out into that world, out to find that information. Okay, so I just wanted to show you an example, and this is an instructor example of connectivism. It's called the Open Syllabus Project, and it is fantastic. And what it does is, first of all, you can go ahead and submit your syllabus, and they will put it in there. The other thing it does, it goes out and it screen scrapes the internet to go ahead and find any public syllabus that is out there, and it puts it in this database. Now, the cool thing about it is then you can go to this database and you can look at the different syllabi. You can also go ahead and they have a ranking of the most popular texts for different courses. So if you were developing a new course and and you were wondering, well, in higher education, what books are normally read if I'm teaching, say, a sociology class, you can totally go there and look it up. Now, if you were going, I am going to teach a sociology of environmental studies class, you might not immediately know which textbook everyone uses. Again, you can go here. This is a real example of connectivism. And I'd like to show you a couple other things here. Okay, connectivism, these are some of the additional principles. One of them, and which we always have to be sure about, and this is where Wikipedia gets in trouble sometimes, connectivism is where currency or accurate, up-to-date knowledge is the intent of all connectivist learning activities. So while you send your students out, you also want them to know how to evaluate what they're seeing. And I just wanted to show you a couple more examples of connectivism. This is one that I took part in this summer. It was EdChange Global. Took place online 2 days, and everywhere you see red, there were educators from those countries jumping in and doing sessions and also presenting sessions to people. So great example of connectivism. This is another one that you can go ahead and sign up for. This one is happening next week. It's Technology, Colleges, and Communities World Online Conference. And I am posting the slides. And if you go onto the slides in the notes, I have all this information in the links. So you can go ahead and do that. But you can go ahead and participate in this conference. This conference is actually done by the University of Hawaii, and it brings people in from the mainland, where we currently are in Colorado. And there's also a good amount of people who jump in from South Korea, Japan, and Australia and New Zealand. So English is the presentation language, but if next week, if you feel like jumping in, there's pretty much going to be, I think, about 24 hours worth of sessions split over 3 days. Again, a great example of connectivism that you as an instructor could jump in here and learn from your peers across the world. You're using technology, and you're also using technology to go ahead and do this. So we're going to be wrapping up here, but another part of the concept of connectivism, choosing what to learn and the meaning of the incoming information is seen through a lens of shifting reality. I mean, this could be as easy as there was a law this week, and then Congress passed, passed, and the president signed something new. And depending on your content area, if you're dealing with legislation or regulations, you could expect things to change. There's some other areas that things are less likely to change. But for connectivism, you're always looking to see what the right answer is now, and you're always looking for the updates. I know it was discussed in week 1 about how you'll be looking for YouTube, and there'll be some technology, but it'll be the wrong one. That's a big thing with technology. Technology is practically in perpetual beta. Technology keeps changing and changing and changing. So because of that, if you are giving your students, say, a YouTube link, you're going to have to go back and check it each semester. Also, let your students know, I mean, that YouTube link could change during the semester even. So we're going to end up here. And while some people might go, oh, I'm in science, nothing changes. Well, I don't believe anyone will do that. But what I'm saying, sometimes things that we believe are absolute truths sometimes change. And I'm ending it with Pluto, which I totally believe is still a planet, no matter what anyone says. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. Welcome to week 2, and we will have a great week.